From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
There's always hope. Now, there is a phrase that we use and sometimes in reverence and sometimes in frustration, and it is in reverence, for God's sake. And in frustration, it's for God's sake. And, some of you may have had someone say that to you about something. I mean, I think my mother was a sweet soul, loving soul, but there were a couple times where she might have said, "Howard, will you clean this room for God's sake?" Or something like that. Or, "Will you turn off the TV and go do your homework for God's sake?" Or so. Not often, but she did. So anyway, I had a choice at that point, And would I be responsible? And would I respond to that and do what was called upon? And would I do what was a disciplined thing, to turn off the TV and go do my homework or whatever? So, we know that God is not a parent, and we in Unity do not portray God as an anthropomorphic being standing off in the sky somehow in that vein. God is spirit. Yet at the same time, our relationship with God is very important and ongoing, and it is very personal as well. And you can talk to God as well as talk from an awareness of God. It's a part of life, our relationship. Well, we talk about our mission and our purpose in life in various ways, and we have emphasized at other times the importance of our mission being, we're here to love, and we're here also to enter into the consciousness of oneness, and that really, they're one and the same. Out of oneness, you will come to know love, and out of love, you will come to know oneness. And it's spoken of in additional ways, too, and so today I want to kind of speak of our mission in this life. Very simply put, is to be an agent of God, okay? To be a representative of God's nature, okay? God's nature is love, and out of that love, we realize oneness, but it's to be an agent of God is to bring that into expression, to really get a sense that you have a mission about doing something to bring that forth into this world and into your life. It means that everything that we do or say or think really can be for God's sake, okay? For God's sake. And so our mission as human beings basically could be said to be to overcome our failings, to overcome our limitations, to choose goodness above anything that appears to be less than that goodness, because we're always making choices. That we're here to grow, to grow on behalf of God, to take on God's likeness. I hope there's nothing you argue with within that framework, basic and simple. So that our meaning in life, basically, to have meaning in life, it's really found in having clarity in what our mission is. If you have a sense of what your mission is on a daily basis in this life, there's a sense of fulfillment and meaning that is brought to every day. And anyone who thinks that they don't have a mission in life is really unfortunate, because from that belief and idea really comes complexity and confusion and fragmentation. And so it's important to kind of have a sense of what your mission is. And a person has to get beyond the thinking that they're just a small speck in this universe, insignificant, that their life really doesn't play that big a role, or they don't have really that important a part to play. They don't really have a significant contribution to make. That's not true. That's not true. There's a guy named Sir Arthur Eddington, and he was an astrophysicist and a mathematician around the early 1900s. Early 20th century, and he was a well-known guy, and he came out with kind of this analogy. He said, if we were to liken the universe, this is back in the early 1900s, if we were to liken the universe to Grand Central Station, filled to the rafters with dust, then one speck of dust in that whole Grand Central Station would be proportionate and equal to the size of planet Earth. And then if you factor in the fact that there are approximately 7 billion people on that one speck of dust, it can make a person feel pretty small and insignificant. But that's the lie that our mind wants to tell us, you see, in terms of looking outward and looking at form. The truth is that we have a role and a purpose that is vital, and it's vital to God. Our existence really matters. It's important for you to realize that. You're in this life not just to get through it. You know, you're in this life with a sacred purpose and to have meaning. Now, the Bible is our main textbook, and in Unity, we tend to focus on mainly the Gospels because we're a Jesus Christ teaching, and Jesus is our teacher, our way shower, and so. In addition to that, however, we do dabble into the teachings of Paul. He had a major transformation, and with that came a sense of an experience that he could speak about and have some clarity about, so that's important. So we spend a lot of time in the New Testament, but we also focus some on the Old Testament, and particularly in the Old Testament on what is called the Torah, and the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. All right, and in there, especially in the first couple chapters, there are a lot of stories and a lot of truth that are allegorical and metaphysical, and so there's a lot there. And you need to know that the Torah is actually what was referred to as the scriptures back in biblical times, that is the Jewish scriptures. And that Jesus was a Jew, was Jewish, okay? And he was referred to as rabbi, and that's in the scriptures as well. Rabbi, teacher. And so in a sense, we honor Jesus by recognizing the truth and mysticism that can be found in the works of Judaism. And so I want us today to look a little bit at Jewish mysticism. I love mysticism anyway, but I want to look at Jewish mysticism in terms of what it says in relation to one's purpose and meaning in life, one's mission. I think it has an interesting perspective. And it aligns pretty much with what we have and teach here too. I found it very interesting. Now, to really understand where we're going, you have to understand a little bit about Jewish mysticism. There's something called the Talmud, T-A-L-M-U-D. And the Talmud is a central text of rabbinic Judaism. It is a collection of writings. And it consists of over 6,200 pages. And actually the Talmud, the word, means instruction, learning. And it is written in Hebrew and Aramaic, and it contains teachings and opinions of thousands of pre-Christian era rabbis, okay? Rabbis, thousands that went deep and on a variety of subjects. And it's the basis of all codes of Jewish law, and it's widely quoted in rabbinic literature. That's the Kabbalah. I mean, that's the Talmud. What I want to share now is the Kabbalah. And you've heard about the Kabbalah, and that's the name that is given in the whole range of Jewish mystical activity. The Kabbalah is about mysticism. And while the codes of Jewish law focus on what it is that God wants from man, the Kabbalah tries to penetrate deeper to God's essence itself, all right? So the mystical school of thought in Judaism is known as Kabbalah. And from the Hebrew word, it means to receive, to accept. So the mysticism is something that you have to position yourself to receive, okay, to accept. There's something that takes place in you that begins to create the opening to tap into the mystics and the mystical aspects of life and God. Now, the Kabbalah does not call God, God. That's very important. In the Kabbalah, they call God the Ein Sof, E-I-N-S-O-F. And what that means is the endless one. And I love that. God is the endless one, no beginning, no end. And we talk about God as the infinite, same kind of idea, the endless one. There's no place where God ends off. There's no boundaries. It's everywhere and everything. I love that. And so, according to Jewish teaching, God is unknowable. And we can only know aspects of God that are revealed to us. We talk about that, and that's taught in India, where I go to the Oneness University, they're very clear about that. There's dimensions of God that forget it. Don't try to understand. It's unknowable. And there are other dimensions which are aspects of God that you can come to understand, like God as light is one of them. And there are some others as well, but God as a presence you can know. And so God has to be revealed. And speaking of light, this is very important as we lead up to where I'm heading on this. Light is recognized as, in all scriptures, really, as a metaphor for the revealing of God and for revelations and insights that burst onto your awareness regarding truth that have depth and meaning. So we've dealt with the Talmud and the Kabbalah. You ready to go on? That's important. Okay, so now I'd like to share with you a story from the Kabbalah. And the story goes like this. When the endless one, God, wanted to create the world, he used his endless light to create a spherical vacuum. And inside this vacuum, the endless one created vessels and sent a thin ray of endless light into the vessels. But because the vessels were unable to contain the light, they broke, and the cosmos went into chaos. And the Kabbalah goes on to explain that life is a process of repairing and fixing and reconstructing these vessels. The vessels are to be repaired and reconstructed so that we will one day be able to and capable of holding the light in its fullness. The story conveys that life, as I say, is about fixing and repairing broken vessels. And we, in a sense, you need to get are, to some extent, the ones that are the broken vessels. Now, the story ends in a paradox, however, that's very beautiful and very powerful, which is, it states that although the light surrounds the spherical vacuum, it still fills the vacuum. That although it seems like the light was removed and with the brokenness, that it mysteriously remains in place. Now, obviously, the vessels don't know that, and they feel broken, and they're in chaos of sorts. And so it remains in place. So our application to this story, actually, we have to go to the Torah, which is one of the first 5 books of the Bible. And we'll go to the first book of the Bible, which is Genesis. And you're all familiar with the story that I'm going to kind of share. We read in that book of Genesis that we were made in the image and likeness of God, all right? And so God, being endless light, and we being a vessel, we had God's light placed in us. And according to the story taken from Genesis, man at one time knew it and expressed the light and was the light, and as a result lived in a place called Eden, which was a state, an Edenic state. No fear, no sense of separation, absolute oneness, energies of love, everything coming together beautifully, divine order, all of that. And then we read about a fall, okay? Man fell out of that state of knowing and expressing and experiencing the light in all its fullness. And the light, you see, according to this story, it didn't go away. It went out of awareness. The light never left. Only our living from it left. It was not removed. It mysteriously remains in place, even though we're not living from the light. The light lives in you. Follow that? That is very powerful. That's what we teach. Okay? So Jesus said, "Be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." And from that we conclude that the endless light is perfect, and that we have the light of perfection in us. Yet it's not on display in its fullness. We're in varying degrees and levels of expressing the light of God. And so we have to fix this. We have to repair that. We have to reconstruct in our consciousness back to where we are living and being in the light. because that's what is the truth for us. And the paradox in this is that we have an aspect of us that is perfect. We have an aspect of us that is the endless light, okay? And it remains with us. And at the same time, we are imperfect. We're imperfect as vessels, broken vessels, if you will, according to that story metaphor. And we are living from separation consciousness in varying degrees. So deep within us, all of us have this sense of a memory of who we really are. It's impregnated in us. It's the blueprint, and we yearn to have it. We know there's something more to life, and so something keeps calling us forward and onward and upward. Something is calling us to a grander sense of what the truth is that would set us free. And so on one level, we have this memory, and then on another level, we're human beings with imperfections, struggling in an imperfect world. We can look around and see, yeah, there's imperfection in this world. So what is our purpose and what is our meaning here and what is our mission? What does God desire for us? Well, it is actually that we be consciously engaged in the process of repairing and reconstructing our lives so that we become vehicles and vessels for the expression of the fullness of God itself. All right? That's simply put, to be vessels which we reconstruct within the framework of our consciousness so that we live from the fullness of light, the endless light. Now, we're never alone, and the endless light, as I say, is in us, and we can forget to access that light, or we can kick God out of our awareness. We can choose not to take God along with us as we encounter challenges and things that we face. And when we live consciously, and we consciously seek to connect with God, and we are actually doing that when we are praying, and when we are meditating, and when we're attending a place like this in church, by doing so, we are inviting. We're creating the invitation that God enter into our process of repair and reconstruction and restoration. God has an interest, a vested interest in you and me. You're not God, but you are a spark of the divine. You have qualities and attributes of the divine that are inherent in you to be brought forth. Every set of circumstances that we encounter in this life basically are an opportunity to choose growth, to choose goodness, to choose advancement, to choose spiritual progress. Every opportunity is there. Now I want to share rapidly, if I can, the Talmud, now back to the Talmud, is filled with metaphysics, deep messages, stories that are not to be taken literally, but allegorically. And one of these stories that are in the Talmud is actually the story about the Ten Commandments. And let me tell you how, in brief, this story is portrayed. It goes like this. The angels, they're all excited because God has revealed from his storehouse of good something very special is going to be laid out. It's called the Ten Commandments. And the angels recognize that inside these commandments, there is a special mission to be carried out from those commandments. And as angels, they know that their role is to be agents of God, to carry out all of his missions. And so they assume that one or several of them is going to be called upon to administer these commandments. About then, to their surprise, they become aware of this old guy huffing and puffing and grunting his way up a mountain. And it's Moses. And he's making his way to the mountaintop. And he finally makes it to the gates of heaven. And the angels are really perplexed about this because they go to God and they ask God, what is this imperfect, stuttering earthling doing here in this abode of us perfectly heavenly beings? What is he doing here in our angelic realm? And God says, don't worry, he won't be staying. He just came to pick up some commandments. And the angels weren't pleased about that because they essentially were saying, you're giving this important spiritual assignment to a mortal man? What is his qualifications? He'll take it down to earth and mess everything up. Give it to us. We'll do it. So you get from that that delivering these commandments is a great honor, to receive them. And to receive the commandments carries with it a mission to perform them, live from them on God's behalf. It meant realizing that you are now God's agent on earth. And it was for Moses to understand that in accepting these commandments, he had to believe in himself. He had to have a shift into a sense of worthiness, that he could draw upon an inner power and strength that could carry them out, that could serve God, that could represent God and fulfill that sacred mission. And the story is presented with an element of depth so that it conveys that you are very important and significant to God, that you have been entrusted with really this power so as to grow, so as to build, reconstruct, improve the world and yourself. Be an agent of God. So God tells Moses, unless you realize for yourself what your qualifications are, you can't have this sacred assignment. And God tells him, in and of yourself, you're really nothing. The same way that Jesus was able to say, I myself can do nothing, it's only the Father. Well, in this story, God is saying, in and of yourself, you can do nothing. The source of your self-worth actually can only come from being my servant and my agent. And so within himself, he makes the decision, I will do that, I will do just that. And with the decision came a feeling of confidence in the sense of he was connected to something greater than himself alone. And then from there he asks God, so what's contained in these 10 commandments? And God says, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods. And goes on to say, what else are in these 10 commandments? And he's told, well, keep the Sabbath and honor your father and your mother, and do not murder, and do not commit adultery, and don't steal, and told all the commandments. And from there, Moses presents his case to the angels, that this really is a mission that humanity should have, not just the angels. And so he begins to build his case. He says, because as humans, we're imperfect, and we struggle, and we have temptations, and we live in a materialistic society, and there are all these seductive pleasures and temptations, and as humans, we make lots of mistakes, and we face lots of challenges and problems and circumstances, and we're highly qualified for this mission because we're living in an imperfect world. And we can be lured into doing bad things, while at the same time we can choose to do lots of good. And we can at times fail, while at the same time there are times we can succeed. And we can tear down and destroy stuff, and at the same time we can build things up. So we are imperfect characters in the process of improving ourselves and working toward perfection. And as human beings, we can heal our ills, we can overcome limitations, we can choose goodness, we can grow into being the shining lights that we are truly held to be. This is our divine mission. And if we are willing to accept it, this becomes our service to God. To put that in perspective in your life, The Talmud teaches that ultimately you don't succeed until you first have failed. Isn't that interesting? You're not going to succeed until you first have failed somewhere. And they describe the process of our mission as being one of first to fail, to regret it, to resolve to change, to then choose goodness, and then to be victorious and fulfilled in moving toward being more of a light in the world. Now in Ecclesiastes, which is wisdom literature, Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs are all considered wisdom literature in the Old Testament. And in Ecclesiastes, there's a verse that says, quote, "For there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin." There's no one on earth who's not made a mistake. To err is human. And according to the Kabbalah, then, the purpose of life is to be thrust into a world where problems exist, where there is work that needs to be done, that there are problems and circumstances to be confronted, and our problems, and those are the world, our own and the world, we need to fix them. We're here to repair them. We're here to reconstruct. We're here to rebuild those things that need it within ourselves and within the world. Now, the angels wanted a piece of the action. And so Moses got with them, and they became shareholders of this mission. So you need to know you have angels helping you on the invisible side, and you also have God helping you. We're never alone. God's desire, understand, God's real desire is to be in this world. And God wants to live and participate and make a difference in this world. And the only way to do that is through you and me. And so it is an honor, actually, to say yes and to accept that we're here on a daily basis as our mission and our purpose to contribute to change, to transformation within ourselves, to fix it, to repair it, to reconstruct it, to build the consciousness that moves towards being more of a light. And by doing so, we are altering the world as well. And so, what can our life be about? What can we do? For God's sake? Well, in Proverbs, it states, in all thy ways, know God, and he will straighten your path. In all thy ways, know God, and he will straighten your path. All thy ways is for the masses. If you choose to know God on the highway that everyone can say, okay, I want to know God. If you really do that seriously and conscientiously, then you will be shown a path. Now, a path is not for the masses, not for the public. It's not like a highway. That's for the ways. But a path is shown, and that becomes your private, sacred, individual track where you serve God in this world. It might be art, it might be music, it might be nursing, it might be healing, it might be whatever. Understand that the one who sends us into this life joins us in this life. And everything we go through, God shares it. The Kabbalah puts it this way: whatever God puts you through is also what he puts himself through, because we're really one, and God is always moving through us. So, for God's sake, let us enter the process of this mission to evolve, to grow, to build, to restore, to reconstruct the goodness of God in ourselves, in our community, in our world. For God's sake, let's do it. Are you up for it? All right. God bless you. Get on with it.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.
When you visit Unity of Houston, you'll find a spiritual community, a church where you can connect and learn and grow with a progressive approach to Christianity. At Unity, we welcome you no matter what your beliefs. You'll find a teaching, loving, inspiring experience as we help each other be all we're created to be. Check us out. We'd love to have you. Find us online at unityhouston.org, and remember, life is meant to be good.